Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Discourse Education Podcast. My name is Chung and I'm the H2 History General Paper in O-Levels English teacher here at the Discourse Education. So yeah. Now in this podcast we typically cover, current affairs, right? So news from the past week that may be pertinent for, students taking A-levels general paper in Singapore, but we have decided to sort of change our direction a little bit from this week onwards, and that is that we are still gonna be covering current affairs, right? So breaking them down in simple terms, breaking down the implications of certain events, and basically going through a little bit briefly on how you can use those current affairs as examples in your general paper essays. But at the same time, I also feel that we haven't really been covering enough history content. So from this week onwards, we are going to pivot more towards that as well, right? Covering some, breakdowns of historical affairs that will be pertinent, for Singaporean students or just students in Singapore in general, taking the A-levels H2 history. And yeah. So yeah, this week, we are gonna be talking about somebody that I don't really want to talk about first for our current affairs. And in our history segment, we will be talking a little bit about how the Asian financial crisis of 1997 came about. Alright? So, the first segment here, we are going to be talking about this. Oh boy. Alright, here we go. So, couple of days ago, right, on 26th of March, it's Good Friday today, as I'm filming this, so the Friday before Easter weekend. All right, this piece of news came out a couple of days ago, and it says here essentially that Trump is selling God Bless the USA Bibles for $60 when or rather he was selling it in a concert with Lee Greenwood, a country singer. No idea who he is, right? And they can purchase a Bible that's endorsed by Donald Trump for a mere $59.99. Oh my god, just where does this end with this dumbass? Ugh. So this touches on something that I think many of us, would be familiar with, right? Your typical online grifters and scammers and shit, and they're coming out and telling you that, hey, this thing works, purchase it, alright, and it's good for you, or hey, you purchase it, you're sending a message, right? You will be supporting the so-called rightful president since 2020, since the elections were stolen. So there are a lot of things to unpack here, just to be clear, because number one, obviously, the fact that this guy, who has since been convicted of sexual assault, right, and charged for it, right, and has to pay restitution to, I can't remember her name, but I'm not gonna look it up anyway. But yeah, he was certainly convicted of it. He has gone back on his word on many of his campaign promises in the 2016 elections campaign. When he was president, he has gone back on his word. He has implemented many policies that, from an academic standpoint, is definitely very interesting, because I once attended a lecture whereby it was a lecture by this historian called Odd Arne Westad, right, and he's a Cold War historian, okay, or at least that's one of his subjects of study, and he said that Donald Trump, interestingly, represents the very first president who actually changed USA's foreign policy drastically, right? As opposed to, previous leaders, right? So going all the way back, people like Clinton, Obama, right? George Bush Jr., then Clinton, then George Bush Sr., so on and so forth, right? And if we talk about the president who really changed USA's foreign policy in the past, right? That was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who decided to participate in World War II, right? As opposed to the isolationist kind of foreign policy that Woodrow Wilson implemented in the early 20th century. So Trump was a departure from the typical president who advocated for a lot of world peace and liberal ideals and protections of democracy and freedom, so on and so forth. And Trump represented a huge switch on that front. From an academic standpoint, certainly it's very interesting. From a realistic standpoint and from a practical standpoint, the fact that somebody like Donald Trump is still able to get so much support and attention in the US media only points to, and I don't mean this in a mean-spirited way, but just an utter ignorance on the part of his voters, right? So obviously not all Americans support him. In fact, I would argue that the majority of Americans would not support him, right? And his batshit crazy policies. So for any students who might be watching this and you might be wondering why Trump, as when he was president and even now, why he is such a highly destructive individual on that front, I would recommend you check out other news sources that explain why. In particular, I would recommend, if you want legitimate news analysis, go and check out theconversation.com. So you know what, let me pull up the website for you now. So theconversation.com, all right. I would recommend that you check out some articles on this website that might cover Donald Trump, right? And if you are talking about YouTube commentators, political pundits, or what have you, I would recommend people like, let's say, David Pakman, right? To be clear, his stance is progressive, okay? So make of that what you will, right? Of course, keep in mind that you should, take all this information that's given to you with a grain of salt, certainly. But I would recommend his channel. Go and check it out. All right. So okay. I mean, there's just way too much to break down in terms of like why this guy here is just utterly horrible. But what I want to point out specifically is the fact that he's utilizing or even weaponizing religion in this way. Because if, let's say, right, we take whatever that he's doing there and we apply it into the context of Singapore, right? This not good. That's what I would say. This not good. Simply because, in the context of Singapore, let's say we are a multicultural society, right? And what that means is that we have so many different religions in our society in itself, and among the young people, Christianity happens to be the majority. The problem with somebody like Trump, a firebrand politician, right, capitalizing on religion and so-called hawking his political message and all that actually further emboldens, I guess, his supporters, and the lack of nuance, the lack of critical thinking, just unthinking, conspiratorial, batshit crazy kind of warp logic thinking, right? And it's very easy, okay, to especially capitalize on religious tenets for that. And I just want to make it clear at this juncture, okay, especially in the context of Singapore, when we talk about all these things, certainly there are a lot of sensitive issues to cover here. But just from an objectively sort of observable standpoint, often, right, in the context of the global geopolitics, or in the context of global issues or what have you, extremism often has to start from somewhere, right? It just so happens that more often than not, it would be religious in nature, or it would at the very least carry some sort of religious tinge to it. Now, whether or not, okay, whether or not one believes in a particular religion, right, it's not really what we are looking at here. It's really more of the potential impacts of weaponizing religion and bringing it to a sort of fundamentalist kind of mindset and utilizing that to achieve political gains, which is what Trump is doing here, right? So I mean, first of all, just and I'm in no way trying to crap on the religion that we are talking about here, which is Christianity, right? But at the same time, it's don't you just find it extremely contradictory in a sense? Because something like this, okay, may even be construed as some sort of messianic kind of messaging, right? And in fact, there is a whole conspiracy theory that's constructed around that Donald Trump will be the savior. 2020 will see Trump ascend, and then yada blah yada blah yada blah crazy shit, right? And what is that called? That's called QAnon. Okay, so he is clearly, right, if we look at it from that sort of religious viewpoint, he is clearly not Jesus Christ. He's clearly not Jesus Christ, right? So how is it that the American Christians, okay, would allow somebody like that, or at least those that support him, just to be clear, because, you know, obviously there are a lot of Christians all over the world, and definitely in Singapore as well, who at the very least have that sort of understanding, right, that this guy is bad news. He's bad news, okay? He's just bad news, period, right? So he is branding himself as such, this messianic figure. Follow me, blah 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 blah. But isn't that sort of blasphemous in a sense, according to your own religion's tenets, right? And then he's out here selling, hey, Bibles, you know, yeah, come and purchase these Bibles from me, right? $60, only $60. And then you line his pockets, he runs his campaign. If he indeed becomes president again, and mind you, many of these Christians, right, who support him often come from middle class background, okay, he's gonna screw you over. So okay, so there are a lot of other things certainly to unpack here, and I am definitely not somebody who is equipped to just sort of unravel this crazy thing altogether. Okay, so obviously there are a lot more qualified people out there commenting on this issue, talking about the political implications and sort of overall just how scummy this whole thing is, right? And that's not what we are doing here. We are not a political commentator sort of YouTube channel. We're an education channel, right? We run a tuition business, so we are educating. Right? So I guess the main question then is just I mean I'm trying so hard today to try and be somewhat objective about this, but you can't write this shit, man. Seriously, you can't write this shit. We are living in a nightmare where people like this grifters, right, can just come out and sort of gain all the support they need, and just if you just get that little bit of nuance and understanding, people like that will not be able to influence others. But it points to so many other problems, right? There's a reason why Trump said that his favorite people are uneducated people, because well, anyway, right? So I guess the question then is how do we use this example, right, this third of a human being, okay, in our GP essays? Now obviously it'll be related to questions on politics, alright, but from there we can also get a little bit more specific. So it's not just a question about good governance, okay? It's not just a question about that. It is also questions about it is also questions about good leaders. So now, if there are any secondary school students watching this in Singapore, you will learn in social studies that, hey, what makes a good government? Issue 1, right? Citizenship and governance. What makes a good government? Good leaders, right? Forward-thinking leaders who can anticipate future ones. That's not possible, just to be clear, but at the very least they can do their best to do so. So on and so forth. It may seem very on the nose, I guess, in the context of that particular subject, but it is also incredibly important, because certainly, right, if we look at it from a more sort of deeper academic level, certainly we have different perspectives from which, or different lenses from which we can, view current affairs or historical events, so on and so forth, right? Now, for students, most likely you'll be learning this thing called big man politics, okay? Which means that you take on the lens of looking at history or current affairs using by looking at the policies and the impacts of whoever has the most political power and influence in society, especially in the context of governance and what have you. This is obviously the most common way of looking at all these issues, right? And in the context of general paper, certainly it is a very viable way of looking at issues. But the point I'm trying to make is that good leaders absolutely essential in ensuring that a country does well, right? For instance, okay, and someone like Lee Kuan Yew, right? And again, it sounds like we are kind of tooting our own horn here, but certainly Lee Kuan Yew was a highly respected statesman all over the world when he was still our prime minister, right? Of course, other respected worldwide leaders, right? Both in the current context as well as in the historical whatever eras that you are looking at, right? People like Obama, so on and so forth. Okay, their actions and their policies, right, affect the livelihood of the citizens. In the context of Trump, though, it is more a question of negative influence, because the thing is that for Donald Trump, right, what is he good at? He's good at shifting the goalposts. What does that mean? That means you talk, let's say you are debating a particular issue, right? You are debating a particular issue, and the issue is, let's say, are these boats well drawn? Yeah, those are boats. Obviously, they're not, right? So if let's say we use that as a topic for discussion, for debate, and we talk about that, and you present certain arguments. Shifting goalposts means that you would end up talking about something, but the argument or the topic of discussion gets shifted to something else. And let's say I make a statement like, hey, as a well-respected politician, you should do your best to, let's say, ensure freedom of speech in the context of US aid, right? And then afterwards, as you can see in this picture right here, in case you're wondering what this picture is, he took this photo in June 2020, right, after he tear gassed a whole bunch of protesters who were protesting against white supremacy. So if let's say he made that statement, right, a shifting goalpost would mean that, after someone says, but hey, you tear gas all those protesters, then he will come up with some other excuse that absolves what he did and instead says that, hey, maybe this is not so bad, right? And then they shift the goalpost of discussion. That's what it means in short. Okay. Secondly, of course, spreading misinformation. This one anybody can do, right? As long as you have zero moral fiber, right, and you are okay with lying all the time to achieve your goals. Okay. He's great at that. All right. And most importantly, questioning fact, creating alternate facts to things, creating alternate evidence which cannot be falsifiable. Then is just an unending argument in that sense. He's very, very good at doing these things. The trouble was that when he was president, he normalized these kinds of behavior. He normalized it. So end up what happens is that generally when people want to talk about issues that they care about, right, or issues that are important to them, then they will use this tactic. Or another one would be something like whataboutism. Okay, I'm sure you have heard of that as well. Basically, you are discussing about something, and then they will say, okay, let's say, I make the statement, Trump spread a lot of misinformation, and his misinformation culminated in the January 6th riots and the attempted coup in the Capitol Hill at Washington, D.C. And then he would, the Republicans, which obviously many of them did, they'll say, okay, what about Hillary's emails and Benghazi? So like, again, yeah. As I said, the problem is that such behaviors become normalized. So a few points of analysis here, okay? Leaders, especially negative ones, can influence public discourse. No, that pun unintended, okay? Yeah. Leaders can influence public discourse, alright? Of course, competence is absolutely critical, right? There's no two ways about it, because, would you want this guy, for instance, running your country in Singapore? Running our country in Singapore? I would say no. I wouldn't want him, right? So, basic competence, and by basic competence I don't mean like you have to be a subject matter expert. As long as leaders can influence people, right? Win the hearts and minds of their citizens, okay, and obviously do what's best for the people, right? And having to make certain tough decisions that may not be the most popular, but would in the long run perhaps benefit their citizens. Those are the kinds of leaders that we need, right? And in the case of Trump, obviously he wasn't all these things. So I don't know, maybe I picked this topic instead of the Baltimore Bridge thing, because the Baltimore Bridge thing, I don't know, that tragedy was horrible, but I didn't really want to comment too much on that before the facts come out. So yeah, but for this though, it's just a pattern of a sort of common grifting tactic that you see out there. And the scary thing is, it's very easy to fall for all these tricks, and it's very easy to fall into the rabbit hole of the lack of logic and all the misinformation and all that, right? Because you see it happening to people on a daily basis. Scams, for instance, or multi-level marketing. I myself fell for that once when I was a kid, 18 years old. Yeah, so yeah, those are the points of analysis for this. There you go again, right? Just a quick reminder. And yeah, use them in politics questions, use them in questions related to governance, even foreign policy too, I guess, because obviously Trump pissed off so many of his allies, right? And that stemmed from his almost jingoistic kind of nationalist brand of firebrand policies and what have you. So I what would solve this problem? Honestly, I don't know, right? Because obviously the world is heading towards a very, very uncertain and volatile times. But yeah, oh well. So yeah, unfortunately for this week we have to cut it short, because number one, we are quite behind on quite a bit of work on our own, work that actually generates us revenue, so we gotta go and do that first. Secondly, yeah, there's we are still trying to figure out how we are gonna be talking about the history content stuff without giving too much away, because after all, we are still running a tuition business here. If I'm giving lessons away for free, then I'm not a very good businessman, right? So anyway, thanks for watching this week. It's a short one, but hopefully you still get some examples for your general paper essays. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a question using the link that you can see on the screen. And of course, if you're looking for more tuition help, right? So help for your subjects in general paper, H2 history, and O levels English, certainly do come and drop us a call, right? Our contact details are on our website. You can simply access that, and then you can get our contact information from there. In our lessons, we go through things in much greater detail, and of course we go through all the practices on in terms of how you apply it, how to craft topic sentences, how to write your explanations for your essays, or for the case of EL, all your basic your meta language basics and all that. We cover all those things, right? So yeah, anyway, apologies, this week we gotta cut it short because well, I always say it's actually just me, so I'm running this shit myself, and yeah, there are just a whole bunch of other admin stuff to do, especially considering the date. I think you roughly know what that would be. So yeah, I will see you guys next time, right? Thanks for watching, and yeah.